Hey, Dwayne,
Yes, hello.
it's Burgess. We may be the only two people here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, how you doing?
Fine. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Patrick is here.
Hey, Patrick.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Bobby.
I hope everyone can hear me. The host has just unmuted everyone. As soon as I see Mayor Hill come on, he will be the one to start the meeting. I just spoke to the mayor. He will be joining us shortly.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Hill?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. I haven't called roll call. Do you want me to call roll call?
Yes, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Scott Mast,
Present.
Greg Cummings,
Present.
thank you. Toby Williams
Present.
and Terrell Hill.
Here.
Okay. Everyone is accounted for, and we do have a quorum. The first order of business is the virtual meeting policy draft, which Cassandra Harvey from the law firm can address.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Jill. It's good to see everybody again. It's been a while. The first item we have is the administrative rule governing virtual meetings. On March 20th, 2020, the governor assigned the executive order 2069, which suspended the physical presence for the meeting requirements and which allows our board to meet virtually. That executive order is good until May 8th, unless 2069 is extended by the governor. In the meantime, this policy allows the board, it sets out the procedures for the virtual meeting, which I spoke with Jill about prior to today. There are different platforms the board can choose to use, such as Zoom, GoToMeeting, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, or the board can choose to just do a conference call if it prefers. If at any time the technology that is being used doesn't allow for public attendance and participation, the meeting has to terminate until the technology can be fixed, for a lack of better terms, or to allow for the public attendance and participation. The sunshine law requirements are still there. So the notice has to be posted and minutes have to be taken and open for public inspection. So if the board has any questions, please let me know. And if not, then we would need a motion to adopt the administrative rule.
Okay, I entertain a motion at this time. If there are no
Make
further
a
questions,
motion to adopt the virtual meeting rules.
just for the record, that's Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
And Captain Williams, I second that.
There's a motion on the floor in a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no discussion, question is called. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to our next item of business. Just 1 second. Is the approval of the minutes? Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
Is there a motion? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Greg Cummings, I make a motion to approve minutes from the last police pension board meeting.
Captain Williams, second that.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor in a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to our next item of business is our valuation report for 2019. Patrick Donlin of Foster & Foster.
Hey, everybody. You guys have copies of the report?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, if you go to page 5, as you guys know, every year as of October 1st, we look at the assets in the plan, and then we project out all the future retirement benefits and determine an appropriate funding requirement. And we always do it 1 year ahead. So the report you're looking at, 10-119 valuation, that determines the funding requirements for next fiscal year. And so you can see the costs went up slightly. The city and state requirement for the current year is 23.5% of payroll. And for next year, it'll be 24.3% of payroll. And the only reason for that is the fact that the board has been gradually reducing the investment return assumption. So last year it was 7.7%, and this year we're changing it to 7.6%. So if we think we're going to earn less on our investments, then we're going to have to put in more contributions. If it were not for changing the assumption, then that city and state requirement would have been 23.1% of payroll. So it would have went down by 0.4% of payroll. So really not too exciting of a report, which is good. For the assets, if you go to page 28, so for the 1 year, 9/30/19, the plan earned 3.58% after all the fees. And we had a 7.7 assumption expectation. So we missed the mark by 4% of our assets. But we always use that 4-year smoothing technique. So the 4-year rolling average, as you can see there, was 7.89, and we were expecting 7.7. So we beat it on average over the last 4 years. So we actually had a slight actuarial gain on the investment side when we're using the smoothing for funding. And this is when the smoothing's working great, because you had 1 bad year and 1 great year, but on average, you've been right on your assumption. And so if we get a 0% return this fiscal year, we'll still have a 5.46% 4-year average. So the smoothing might come in handy during the current fiscal year also. Does everybody understand that 4-year smoothing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And the other issue every year, or one of the other issues, is the turnover, and that's on page 34. But you guys, as usual, had a lot of turnover. You had 28 non-drop police officers, 10-118, 3 people in the drop. And then 2 people terminated vested. 1 person got a refund of their contributions. You had 2 retirements and 1 drop, and you hired 7 new police officers. So at the end of the year, you had 29 non-drop and 2 in the drop. So you still had 31 police officers. It's just instead of having 3 in the drop, you only had 2 in the drop at the end of the year. So because you had less people in drop and more people active, that increased your payroll, which helped on page 5 because some of our fixed costs now are a lower percentage of payroll when your payroll goes up. So if you're already towards the back of the report, you can go to page 43. So every year the city has to put a liability on their balance sheet for the pension plan. And last year that liability was $1,791,000, and this year it's $1,676,000. You can't use any smoothing on the GASB, so we would have expected it to go up, the liability there, the net liability. But we always use the liability experience 1 year ago. So in the 2018 valuation, you had 1 retiree pass away and you had low salary increases. So there was gains, and those showed up this year in the GASB statements. So that's why your net pension liability actually went down a little bit from 1.79 to 1.67. And as a percent of fiduciary net position as a percentage of total pension liability, that's like the funded ratio. And that actually went from 86.5 to 87.3%. And most plans try to be in the 80 to 100% range. So the plan is very healthy at the moment. Now, if we go back towards the beginning of the report to page 17. So your unfunded actuarial accrued liability last year was 1.38 million. That's really a measure of where we are compared to where we'd like to be. And we expected it to go to 1.29 million because we make payments each year to pay that down. And in the end, it was 1,519,000. But you can see where that difference came from. The assumption changes were 148,000 increase. So if it wasn't for the assumption changes, your UAL would be about exactly the same as it was last year. And the experience, we had a little bit of a gain on the investment side. Salary increases were larger than expected. Remember the previous year they were low. So I think it might have to do with overtime or what have you, but this year they were higher. And so that was a loss of 202,000. The turnover was more than expected. So that was a gain of 158,000. Luckily, nobody passed away. So that was a loss of 41,000. So your overall experience was net a loss of 73,000. Those were kind of the highlights I wanted to go over, but I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Do you have any questions at this time?
No questions.
No questions.
Well, then the board should approve the report by motion, and then it'll be official, and I'll send it to the state.
I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Greg Cummings, make a motion that the actual report from Foster and Forster be approved.
Captain Williams, second.
Was there a motion on the floor in a second? Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you a lot, Patrick.
No problem, and thanks for all you guys do to help with this virus and all that.
We definitely appreciate you. So we'll move on with the agenda now. Dwayne Madron, Capital City.
Hello. You hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Okay. Dwayne Madron, Capital City Trust. This is going to be the abbreviated Zoom version. You should have a packet electronically or otherwise in front of you. And I'll just go over the fourth quarter briefly and move on to other things. Fourth quarter of 2019 was good. In fact, the whole year was good. The plan earned 20 on the equity side, earned 25%. Equities were up 28. Bonds were up 19. These are the bonds that we manage. And real estate was up 29 and cash 1.9. Because the China trade war deal was implemented and because interest rates came down, helped equity markets in 2019. The economy was steady, but because there was some good news in the fourth quarter, tech stocks took off and rallied and helped the equity market. So at the end of the year, everything looked really good. Then I'll move on, and I have results through March 31st. And these are also in your packet. There's a 3/31 performance summary. So through March 31st, due to the virus and other things, the total account on the equity side is down 20%. Equities are down 23, bonds are down 12, and real estate's down 24. Let me briefly summarize what has happened on the equity side. Along about February 25th, the bad news from the virus surfaced. The market, and a few days later, began a rapid capitulation and sold off approximately 30% down to March 23rd. After March 23rd, the market turned around in almost a V-shaped recovery and shot right back up again due to the federal government's $2 trillion stimulus and then another $2 trillion stimulus loan package, coupled with other pieces of good news that started to surface. So I looked at some numbers this morning. Through April 20th, the account is up $489,000 on the equity side, and that's a 5% increase in the month of April alone. So there's been a great rally. Rallies are typical in bear markets. I don't know if this rally is going to hold. There's likely to be consolidation. But our basic premise is that there still is a lot of uncertainty out there. There are a lot of guesses as to what is going to happen between now and December. And because of this wide range of estimates, we at Capital City are being cautious. And when I mean cautious, we're staying about 3 to 4% under where we normally would be with equities. So today we're about 53% equities, where normally I'm more like 57, not including infrastructure. So we're being cautious. We're letting the market float us back up. And I imagine in the next 60 days, I will put some money to work, but it's sort of a case by case, day by day thing with us because there's so much news and so many new things happening. And in addition to the virus, there's a price war going on in the oil industry, where the price of oil, as you probably know, has got down close to zero. So that really hasn't helped. And then banks are not making any money because interest rates are close to zero, and that hurts banks. You put those two together, along with the consumer staying home and not spending, the economy is slowing down to a standstill and a recession this next quarter. And then the fourth quarter of this year, hopefully, according to many estimates, the economy will grow again, and stocks by that time will be much more than today, we hope. So having said that, let me just see if there's any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions at this time?
No questions.
No questions.
Okay, thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to accept the report as given.
Captain Williams makes a motion to accept capital city report as given.
Greg Cummings, second.
There's a motion on the floor in a second. Is there any unreadiness? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you.
Okay, I see Ms. Harvey on the phone as well. So again, thank you as well. Moving on, Burgess Chambers.
Yes, sir. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. First of all, I want to thank Jill for being so well organized and putting this thing together under the circumstances. A real challenge, but it's gone very smoothly. Dwayne did a great job of talking about 2019 calendar year, so I don't want to go over those great numbers. As you know, you're up about 22% for the year. But I want to just sort of fast forward and kind of give you an update on what's happened since then. Do you all have a supplemental piece that should be available to you dated March 31st?
Yes.
Okay. And that reflects the obvious that we took a big drop in equities in the quarter. Overall, the plan was down about 14.5%. And you can see that was predominantly in the, was pretty much across the board in the equity categories. There are a few there that were fairly defensive. The Cohen and Steers Global Infrastructure, which is a new addition, relatively new, was down only about 17.6%. You look at it by comparison, mid cap was down 27, small cap was down 30. So there's a defensive aspect of that class of securities. And then the convertible bonds, which we categorize as an equity by statute, they were down 13.4%, considerably, roughly half of what the other equities are down. So if you link the March quarter with the fourth quarter of last year, and then pull it on through to April 17th, that would be a fiscal year to date estimated return. That is October 1 last year through April 17th of this year, you're down about 6.2%. And that's really good. And the fact that you're up, hold on a second. Just a second, bear with me. Yeah, okay. You're up 6.3% in the past 17 days, which brings the fiscal year-to-date return to minus 3.6%. So whatever I said earlier, this is a strike that. It's minus 3.6 from October 1 through April 17th, and that's a very good return. The fact is that in the last 17 days, you've gone up by 6.3%. And as you all know, everyone's waiting for the country to open up and for the news to continue to be favorable. And if that's the case, if we follow what's happening in Europe, namely Sweden, Germany, and others, we may see a surprising uptick in the equity markets driving overall returns. We could easily see another 10% move upwards in the next 30 days. It's anybody's guess. And then if that's the case, that would put you into positive territory fiscal year to date. I asked Dwayne earlier when he wanted to rebalance, and he mentioned in his remarks already that he's waiting for conditions to become more favorable. And that's all I have for today.
Okay, we have any questions?
No questions.
I've got one question, Burgess. Would
Yes,
we
sir.
need to if we found ourselves in a situation where it was deemed by you and Dwayne that we needed to change the policy as conditions change, would we need to grant any authority to do so now, or would we just reconvene if necessary?
Well, let me start. Dwayne, you can hop in here. I think the policy gives you a fair amount of latitude here. And Dwayne is currently operating within the policy, and there are ranges within each asset class. I don't believe that Dwayne would want to liquidate the equities, Mayor, and go down to a draconian, get out of the market. He can speak for himself, but if he wanted to do something like that, we could certainly hold a special Zoom meeting and make appropriate changes to the investment policy. And council is on the phone too to weigh in on this. Dwayne?
I don't anticipate making draconian changes, especially since interest rates are zero. We have 5 or 6 research partners that we deal with, and none of them has indicated that the second half of this year will be better, if not much better. So I'm optimistic. There's, like Burgess said, there's at least 10 to maybe 20% upside between I'm happy to buy, I want to buy. The volatility right now is so high. There's so much uncertainty out there. I want to wait till things calm down a little bit. But sure, I mean, I know that there are ranges and I stay within them. I don't anticipate going out of those ranges.
Right. This is Cassandra. Our office has been discussing the issue of rebalancing the portfolios for our plans in between meetings. And I'm going to double check as far as the latest, the consensus is with them. The last time we discussed it, we were fine without a board meeting that the portfolio be rebalanced within the guidelines of the policy.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't find ourselves hamstrung, having to come back in and try to make an adjustment if we provided additional latitude during a state of emergency.
Correct, right. As long I know it was, as long as it's in the policy statement, then the rebalancing between meetings is okay. I will double check to see what, like I said, the consensus of the office more recently. That was earlier last month.
Cassandra, if I may, Mr. Chairman, if I may, the bank, Capital Cities Bank, has a discretionary authority under contract to rebalance pretty much whenever they see appropriate.
Wonderful.
So that covers that. The only part of that is if they needed more out of the bond area, under the circumstances, Dwayne, you should feel don't hesitate. If you need some bond money to go back into the equity markets, you shouldn't call a special meeting for that.
All right.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll entertain a motion to accept the report.
That's Captain Williams. I make a motion to accept the report from Burgess.
Greg Cummings, second.
There's a motion on the floor and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we will go ahead and call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Again, thank you, Burgess.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, moving on. Ms. Harvey.
It's good to see everybody. I'm glad we all can convene together, although virtually. I hope everybody's doing well. I have several things that I'd like to discuss since it's been a while since we last spoke, but the only thing on the agenda I see is the fee increase. The last meeting, we discussed a fee increase from the current rate of $265 to $300. $300 is what the General Employees Board is currently paying for their hourly rate. The board asked that I go back and get a quote for retainer fee, which I did. I received 2 quotes, one for attendance, for my attendance at the meetings physically, and that would be $7,000 for the year, or the other quote is for $6,000 annually, and that I would attend by phone. the fire board ended up approving this $6,000 annually for virtual attendance. So if you do the 7,000, I could split the travel costs and time with the GE board moving forward. Oh, I'm sorry. And that the two costs are exclusive of disability claims, litigation, and any tax issues. Anything outside of the retainer would be at the $300 an hour.
Correct. Any questions pertains to the increase in fees?
If I could interject, I will say that Cassandra and I have been talking about the ordinances that need to be brought up to what is currently law, and it also our individual documents, our individual forms that we use need to be revised and brought up to current standards as well. I'm hoping that's going to be done in the next year or so.
Yeah, we can start on it whenever you'd like.
Any questions?
And that work would be done within the $6,000 retainer fee.
And if there's no other questions, I guess my recommendation would be that we go ahead and just do the $7,000 retainer fee as opposed to and split the cost. So it'd be roughly $6,500 per group, correct?
Per group, I'm sorry.
You're saying we would split with general pension, we would split the travel fees?
Right. So exactly. So if it costs, I don't know, $300, $400 to travel to the meeting, it would be $150 for your board, $150 for the GE board.
And so I think we should do that just so that if there is a need for her to actually make a special appearance, we're not, because without it, you'd be at the $300 an hour rate to travel, right?
Yes.
And so
But Mayor, I just wanted to point out that the 7,000 doesn't include travel expenses, right?
That includes my attendance at the meeting.
But he was saying 6,500, he thought, because the extra 1,000 would be split between general and police.
So the extra 1,000, well, the GE board's rate isn't changing. So,
So if we're splitting travel, would it be less than the 7,000?
right. So the email that I got from the partners says, let's see, that the 7,000 would include traveling up there. But with that, thinking out loud, that would not be split because that includes travel. You understand what I'm saying? Palatka. So it would be 7,000 for travel, and I apologize, I strike that. It's just 7,000, including the travel, and there would be no splitting because that includes all travel fees.
But you already have a retainer when you're traveling already for one board, correct?
I do, and that does not. They did not go with the attendance at the meetings. They went with the $6,000 annual retainer fee.
Okay. Well.
And then for 6,000, she would just attend the meetings on her phone?
Correct.
All right. So what's the pleasure of the board?
So maybe another question to clarify, if we go with the 7,000, including travel, Ms. Harvey, if you do anything at that time with the general pension board, do they have a cost reimbursement, so to speak, to us for your travel, or is it just totally separate?
That would be, right, that would be separate. Your retainer would be for 7,000. The GE board would be $300 an hour. So they are, right, each board, at that point, each board would be totally separate. Jill, do you know what their annual fees are, or Patrick, do you know what their annual fees were for the last year?
For which board?
For police?
I'll check right now.
Thank you.
From
And so we know-
October to December, we've spent $1,140 for one quarter. Say $1,200 a quarter.
Okay. If that helps anybody, I think Patrick's going to get the annual fee, the annual cost.
All right, give me one. I have the wrong report open, sorry. Well, it was a pretty light year last year. 3,657 is what I have for the fiscal year.
Okay. So 3,057 was for fiscal year 19.
3,657.
If that helps anybody with their decision.
So your recommendation, go ahead.
Patrick, was that amount just for travel and attendance at meetings on top of the retainer?
Yes, but I don't know how many meetings they came to in fiscal 19.
Just the one. We went, I was at the December meeting, and the travel was split between the three boards at that time.
Well, December actually would have been in fiscal 2020. So 2019,
Right.
you
Then
may
there was
not
no.
have been at any.
Correct.
So that number was for total legal fees.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so in essence, the recommendation is to double last year's, is to double what we had for last year's legal fees as a flat fee.
You could do that with a retainer fee, or you could, the other option is the $300 a month if you don't foresee the board using our services as much as the retainer fee would cover.
And so do we have an estimate? Do we have an estimated time as to what the change in ordinances is going to be?
How much time it would take to redo it? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I don't. I mean, it depends on if I do a total restatement that could take some significant time, which I think it's been a while since your ordinance has been updated. And then with the forms, redoing the forms, updating those, with the retainer fee, you know what you're paying. It's either 7,000 for the year, 6,000 for the year. Like I mentioned, exclusive of disabilities, litigation, tax issues. You know what you're getting. If you do the hourly rate, and then it's by the hour.
So
The
at this
rate
point,
I'm sorry, the $300 rate is, just so you know, it is lower than most of our clients are currently paying. And it's in line, or if not below average, for other fees for other law firms that practice the similar legal issues.
Agreed. I wholeheartedly agree. Any comments or motions from the board at this time? Yeah, and so I think if we look at it overall, I think if we anticipate having at least 10 hours of legal services in place to deal specifically with the change in the ordinance and policies, then we should go ahead and use the $6,000 retainer to get those things in place. I would guess that there's probably going to be at least 10 hours as it relates to updating what we have in place. So my suggestion would be that we either do the $6,000 or $7,000 retainer. I'm thinking the $6,000 because we're probably going to be stuck into the COVID world for a little bit longer this year. It probably makes more sense to do it at $6,000.
So I'll make a motion that we accept the $6,000 fee.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a
Second.
second? There's a second by Mr. Commons. Is there any further discussion from the board? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Again,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
No, I think that's a good decision. There will likely be a lot of work, and now we can work on it until it needs to get done and not have to, worry about how much it's going to be. Moving forward, I have a couple of items that I'm not sure if you have in front of you, but there was a change to the Florida's notary law. Do you have the notary memo in front of you? By chance?
No. Hold
Okay.
on.
If not, I'll summarize it. In January 1st, 2020, the Florida signed into law the ability for notary publics to notarize documents via remote online technology, similar to Zoom, like we're using here, and other technology services that are approved by the state. I think of most importance for the board is when it comes to powers of attorney. A power of attorney needs to be notarized, and it is able to be notarized remotely now. However, if the board or if the administrator receives a power of attorney from an agent seeking to change a retiree's beneficiary or member's beneficiary, that power of attorney is not valid to make that change if the agent and the principal were not in the physical presence of each other when the document was notarized. I know that's a lot to kind of digest. Does that make sense?
Ms. Harvey,
Yes.
how is that validated?
We generally look it over. If a plan gets a power of attorney, they'll send it over to us. We'll make sure that it's valid. We don't recommend just the administrator looking it over, especially now with these new laws in place. So if you do have a power of attorney, we suggest sending it to us. We'll look it over. Also, with the power of attorney, the third party, with the power of attorney that is notarized remotely, the third party, such as the board, can ask and rely upon the notary's electronic journals. That's their official record, their journal of the notarization. If they cannot produce those journals, then that power of attorney can be rejected as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There is just one other thing related to that. So now the jurats of the forms that the board has would have to be changed. It's a simple change. It's just a little checkbox that says whether or not says how the document was notarized, whether it was notarized remotely or within the physical presence of the notary. So that is that one. I will work with Jill if she has any questions on it, because it was a very, there was a lot in that bill. So I'll work with her for the future. The next thing is the CARES Act that was signed into law in March. There were some changes that affect the plan. The typical 10% penalty for withdrawing money early before 59 and a half from your retirement plans is waived for calendar year 2020. That you can take a coronavirus related distribution up to $100,000 from January 1, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. And the 10% penalty is waived. You can pay that back to your retirement plan within 3 years or over 3 years in equal installments. The only thing that needs to happen is a certification from the member to the plan administrator saying that this is a coronavirus related distribution. And there are certain criteria that meet that the eligibility for the distribution. And then I don't think your plan allows drop loans. I didn't see it in the ordinance because there was just a provision that allowed for drop loans as well. But if your plan doesn't provide drop loans, then it doesn't apply. Were there any questions about the CARES Act, or any questions that you may have had?
No.
No. Okay, good. And then I think, one other thing, two things, sorry. So again, January 1st, 2020, the IRS was made a change to the required minimum distributions date, which was age 70 and a half. And now that was increased to age 72. You can leave your plan, you can leave your money in your account until you're 70 and a half or 72, provided you hadn't turned 70 and a half December 31st, 2019. So it's not retroactive. Let's see. The last thing was an ordinance change that we made based on that IRS changes. We made some updates to the plan, just a few that changed the required minimum distribution date. I don't know if you have it in front of you. The fire board tabled it to the June meeting because it just because of the situation that we're in. It's kind of hard to look at these documents. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look it over.
Has everyone had an opportunity to review the document?
I have.
Yes.
So it also, besides changing the 70 and a half to 72 for your required minimum distributions, it also adds a little section that allows the board the authority to change the plan document based on any IRS changes by policy, instead of having to change the plan document.
Okay. Having reviewed the documents, is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve the documents as they are.
Second,
There's a motion on the floor and a second. Is there any further discussion?
just a quick question on actuarially speaking, the tables just would start at age 72 and go forth for the RMDs?
So if I understand that, I'm not sure I understand the question.
So currently at 70 and a half, age.
I'm not sure of that answer, but maybe Cassandra does.
Go ahead.
Basically, what he's saying is that you had the required minimum distribution was based upon your expected lifetime from 70 and a half. Is that going to change with the new law?
That I don't know either. I can ask, I'll get with the office and see if anybody has any guidance on that. And I'll report back to Jill.
Yeah, that won't change my second. I think we still approve more of an interest item. Over.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Okay, if you can just maybe give us a quick answer back once you get the information, then
Absolutely.
I think that will work for us. are you going to talk about cyber insurance at all?
So we can talk about it. I think it was tabled because we were wanting to find out what the policy covered. Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
What the cost was.
Okay, so I don't know if you've had a chance to look it over, but it should be in your packet, the quote. And I have it right here. Okay, so the cost for a $2 million policy is $1,250 for the year, and the retention fee is $2,500. So what that means is if there's any claims, the policy will cover anything above the $2,500, the $2,500 retention fee. And then if you go down, it says page 1 of the policy, it tells you what the coverage is. So for example, multimedia liability, damages and claims in excess of the retention, which we said was the $2,500 arising from your multimedia activities. I don't know if the board has any multimedia activities. I'm not aware of any.
No.
Okay, so then the next one talks about security and privacy liabilities. So that if there's a claim against the board for security breach on its computer networks or privacy breaches, it would cover that as well. Now, I think all of your computer systems and networks are through the city. Is that correct?
Right.
So I know there was significant discussion at the last meeting also that the city has its own policy, cyber insurance policy. So that may be covered by the city's cyber insurance policy. The next page talks about, it says insuring agreement number 3, data recovery and loss of business income. So any data recovery that would include notification of the breach, rectifying any issues would be covered. Number 5, crisis management costs, the customer notification expenses, customer support and credit monitoring expenses would be covered on a claim against the board for any security or privacy breaches. Data extortion, so it says that the insurance coverage would pay on your behalf any excess and amount of your retention fee, which is the $2,500. When cyber extortion money is paid by you, the board, following a cyber extortion threat in excess of your retention. So if the board paid any fees, to me that sounds like ransom money. But I would have to do a little more digging.
It is. It's the ransom money that the cities have been forced to pay.
So that would cover that as well. And there are a few others, penalties and fines. So that would be the policy. That would be the $1,250 for the year, and then your retention fee of $2,500.
So let me ask you a question. So does it make more sense for the city to just have a cybersecurity policy for the entire city and list the pension boards as additional insureds, as opposed to trying to have multiple policies out and basically being redundant and spending the money?
So we do suggest or recommend that your vendors add the board as an additional insured to their cyber insurance policy. So it would be a good idea to do that with the city as well. We always recommend getting the cyber insurance, but
So if the city increases its limits, then it's going to be just the same either way.
Right.
And would we satisfy your concerns by having the city have increased limits, and then having the boards as additional insurers? And that way we don't necessarily take it from pension.
Right. That would yes, that would be better.
Okay. So let's if it's the pleasure of the board, we can get that recommendation to the commission to get increased limits overall for the city. the insurance does already exist, and in that way, we don't look at having to create additional insurance policies. We will be covered based upon the city's policy in totality.
I would agree with that.
Makes sense.
So let's just I guess for housekeeping purposes, if we could, I'd entertain a motion to make a recommendation to the city of Palatka to obtain a cyber insurance policy that includes the pension boards. Added in with that would cover us at a minimum of the levels that we would be anticipating at 2 million.
So I'll make a motion that the board request that the city, you say, how much is it, Mayor?
That the board asked that the city of Palatka have a policy that has an aggregate of no less than 2 million to cover the pension boards as additional insurers.
So I make a motion that we do request the city cover the pension board with no less than $2 million to cover the pension for cyber.
It's a motion on the floor in a second. Is there a second?
Second, Greg Cummings.
There's a motion on the floor in a second by Mr. Cummings. Is there any further discussion?
No.
Seeing that, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. And what we'll do, Ms. Kaiser, if we can just make sure we get that on the commission's agenda as soon as possible, then we can maybe address it on Thursday at the meeting so that it's fresh in everyone's mind. And we can actually probably take it as an emergency item if necessary with the information in place. Then what that does is it'll allow us to go ahead and have that protection in place.
Okay, thank you.
Just run it by council. Go ahead and give it okay.
Yep, I will.
Okay. Any other concerns as it relates to cyberspace insurance? Okay. Anything else that we have, Ms. Harvey?
No, thank you for your patience with me, and thank you again for all your service, and thank you very much. I hope to see you guys again soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Kaiser?
Yes.
The expenditures on the item number 9.
Yes, you should have a expenditure worksheet that shows the police funds expenditures from October through December, highlighting the attorney fees, the admin fees, the investment expense, etc., as well as the deposits made for the contributions by the employee and employer for that same quarter.
Okay. Any questions on expenditures? We'll entertain a motion to accept the expenditure report.
I'll make a motion that the board accept the expenditure report as it is.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second, Cummings.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay.
If you will hold a moment, I'll see if there's any public comment on our chat page on YouTube Live. Just one moment.
Okay.
There is no public comment on our YouTube Live chat.
Okay. Just for the record, if you can just stay on that page for a second, we'll open the floor for public comment. If there's anyone with public comment, please enter your comments in the chat line on the YouTube page. Seeing no comment, we'll close public comment at this time. Is there any further discussion from the board? Any other business before the board? Under item number 11, seeing no other business from the board, is there any further discussion? Ms. Kaiser, when are we set for our next meeting?
That would be June, I believe it's the 17th.
If there's nothing further at this time, we want to thank everybody for participating in our Zoom meeting as we continue on with our new normal. If there are any requests or anything else that are in place that would make our meetings go more efficiently as we move forward, then I think once we all become a little more comfortable with doing Zoom on a daily basis, we'll start to see some additional efficiencies in place. I think if we can start to work on using the share button a little more to kind of have the items pop up, it may help us speed certain things up on the meeting, so that we can tap into each one of the reports as they come up, and it's just going to come with proficiency of the software. And so, but I definitely appreciate everybody for taking time out today so that we can have this meeting and move forward. I see Officer Mass. We're glad to have you.
Glad to be here.
And so, if there's nothing else from the board, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion that we adjourn the board meeting.
Okay. There's a motion on the
Second.
floor by general consent. We're adjourned at this time, and the time is 2:34 p.m. So again, thank you all, and look forward to seeing you in June.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Be safe.
Thank you.
Okay.